You got Westy problems, we got Westy solutions. Hashtag nerdy West Coast swing. And hashtag Westy thinking chin.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 22 years and I have about 24. Tonight, we are looking at one of my favorite dances. We looked at one of Cassie's last week. If you didn't see that, it was Kyle and Emmeline. Great one. Tonight, we are looking at Jordan and Sarah, which is exciting, from Boogie 2019, I believe. We don't necessarily have any particular topic we're talking about tonight, but we will next week. And what we're talking about, the dance we're talking about tonight, kind of has some fall over into next week's topic as well, which if you haven't seen, our topic for next week is Keep It Simple. It kind of will relate this week and next week specifically. We're kind of focusing more on social dancing aspect. I know we've been kind of focusing more on the comp aspect of our dance recently. So these two, specifically this week and next week, have two really great examples of what could easily be social dances, not comp dances.
All right, link is in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch, both songs, and when you're done, we will get to analyzing. To the screen share.
This dance, there's a lot that I really love about it. It's one that, like, there's not a lot of really complex things to it, which I think is great, especially when it comes to, more social dancing. It can be really nice to just have a more relaxed dance. And I think that this is a great example of that. And the other thing that can kind of come along with that is you're kind of able to focus on each other a little bit better. You're not focused so much on like what you're doing, because there's not anything super complicated happening or that you really need to put a lot of effort into thinking about. So I think that those are some great aspects of having a more casual dance. So one thing I wanted to mention with this dance specifically, and I mean, it is something that you see in a lot of the dances that we do talk about, but this dance specifically, you will kind of notice that both Sarah and Jordan frequently have their eyes downturned. And we've kind of mentioned that before. And that's part of the focusing on each other, which seems kind of counterintuitive because you're looking down at the floor. So, you would think that that would be less connected with your partner, but it's not necessarily. And I will get more into that a little bit later, but I did just want to mention that. We had a question from last week's video, and there is a pattern that comes up here. I think Cassie was going to kind of talk about that briefly. We talked about switching rails. So the question was, how do you have them switch rails without, for lack of a better term, dragging them by the hand on it or being too forceful in changing their lanes? So right about here, I believe, is where you were wanting to talk about, right?
Yep, and there are also a couple of examples at the very end of the second song that we can talk about. But I actually really appreciate how the way Jordan is leading Sarah here is significantly more subtle than the way Kyle was leading Emmeline last week. For a little bit of context, this is a basic leader's right follows left prep into an inside free spin, basically a fancy left side pass. And what is really important is to understand the nature of how a follow preps internally in their own body for that particular traveling rotation. So I'm going to draw 3 lines, not 1, not 2, but 3. As always, you know, I like to do bird's eye view stuff here. Ooh, pretend those are parallel. Thank you. Bird's eye view, let's say Sarah's over here, Jordan's right here, and this top kind of slot is the one that they're dancing in from a bird's eye view. In this position that Sarah is in, her left foot is about here. Oh no, her right foot, sorry. Her right foot is about here. I always have to reverse it because I'm looking at her. I am not her myself. Anyways. And her left foot is about here. She is in a very narrow stance, like from Jordan's perspective. And she's already technically prepped right here. Yeah. The only reason that Jordan doesn't lead her into a rotation right away is I can think of 2 reasons at this point in time. One, that her left foot isn't here, because that ever so slight difference would prep her even more and put her really in like the prep pocket, as it were, to release really easily. And then the other reason is just musically. He wanted an extra 2 counts before he started rotating her. So pretty simple reasons. Now, one of the things I was talking about, I'm going to go to a new frame for another drawing, last week, was the idea that when you're prepping a follow, you have to take into account the lever length of their arms, right? So Sarah is smaller. So to get her to prep either in a closed prep, whatever this degree is, requires less distance to go from point A to point B than a follow who has a longer lever length. And to get that same angle of rotation, you have to travel through more distance from point A to point B. However, and this is something I was kicking myself after last week, because I was like, yeah, real glad I talked about that. But this particular example is for a different kind of prep. This is as if Jordan was leading a leader's left, follower's right prep for an inside roll. But in this example, and the example I was talking about last week, it's leader's right, follower's left. And instead you have a more open degree in the follow. So instead of having this tight angle, if we look at Sarah right now, Sarah has a much more open degree of rotation in her left shoulder specifically, right? And now if we go back to this drawing, I want to redo this to show, I'm sorry, this is like masterclass right here, but I really wanted to answer the question because it was a really good question. So if we go back to the kind of same situation that Kyle and Emmeline were in last week, she was anchored onto her left foot, and her right foot, she's facing this direction, and her right foot was kind of just pointed out in front of her, but hovering off the ground. Mm-hmm. And Kyle had her left arm. Pretend this is a hand and not a horrifying claw. So to get specifically to Erin's wonderful question, the idea of not yanking, it's understanding what the range of motion through space, the point of connection is that would be comfortable for that follow to get them in the correct position for their prep. Mm-hmm. So with Emmeline, she had more of a 90-degree relationship between her shoulder and her arm right at the beginning of the pattern. And to get into that prep position where her right foot would be here, because they changed rails more than Jordan and Sarah are doing here, and then her left foot to be here, her shoulder would now be here. and it would be opened up more, kind of like what Sarah is looking like right now. And this is the part where people get confused. The tendency is to take the hand as a leader and just rotate it across the slot, which can have the correct effect on a really small follow like Sarah. But with a follow like Emmeline or myself, who are both taller and have longer arms, I'm going to change colors right here. The trajectory not only has to cross the slot, but it needs to travel down the slot in order to get the follow to open up their chest and their arm into one line. So it's prepped for the release of the turn. So you're getting this effect, not this one. But if you just rotate across the slot, what you're doing to the follow is you're keeping them in a tight relationship between their arm and their shoulder. And that is actually much harder of a prep to release because there's less tension or spring built up in the follow's shoulder and upper body to release. So it's actually a lot more work in a leader's right hand follows left hand inside free spin to prep that way. The reason I bring this up is I experienced this a lot dancing socially for the first time in a year and a half. I tend to get A, and then I am still in this relationship when I am quote unquote on the prep count, but I'm not actually prepped. It's really important to get the follow into this really lovely position where they're almost about to release an arrow from a bow. You need to get the follow into that position. And the trick is to take the handhold not only across the slot, but down the slot enough that the follow opens up into this position. Once you start practicing with this, it'll feel really natural because a follow will just stay more weighted on whichever back foot they're on. And then you'll get to draw this foot to where it feels natural. If you feel resistance in the handhold, you're probably either taking them too far or not far enough in one of the two directions. And that's fairly simple to start kind of micro adjusting as you practice this. You can even on the social floor, if you feel comfortable asking for some feedback, because like it's not okay to teach on the social floor, but I would say it's okay to ask for feedback.
Yeah.
So if you're in the position to ask for feedback, you can be like, hey, I'm trying to learn how to prep you properly for this pattern on count 2. Could you show me what your 1-2 looks like, including miming with your arms as if I'm attached? And you'll see what their range of motion is in their left hand from the beginning of the pattern through that count 2. And that's all the information you need to know, because you just need to basically take that hand through that range of motion. Okay. Bill Nye the Science Guy session over. Did that make sense to you, Alicia?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Alicia?
Kind of.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about this part, but it wasn't necessarily adding on to the answer to that question.
Okay.
But I did want to talk about Sarah here. So we've talked about hanging back as a follow before, and this is a really fantastic example of that. So a lot of times what you would see is the follow. So you can see that Sarah is settled back on that right foot, and she stays really like at an angle backwards with her upper body until Jordan is really moving her forward. So she stays back until really she takes that step with her left foot, I think. Yeah. So right about here when she takes I guess it's her third step. So the second step she takes with that left foot, she then kind of comes up over the top of that foot. But all of it beforehand, she still has kind of an angle backwards, is that it's really important as a follow to kind of keep that back pitch until you are led to come up over that foot. And a lot of times what you'll see is on this first step that she would take, she would be up over that foot. So she's already ahead of the lead that Jordan has. So then she's kind of visually following, kind of guessing what he's following. Like it's just not her allowing him to move her, which the way that I like to think, hanging back is kind of about letting your lead move you. Because I think a lot of times we think as follows, we need to have our own body weight, our own independence, which yes, however, it is a lot more helpful in most situations to kind of hang back and let your lead move you. A lot of times you'll see, really at most levels, you'll see follows that you can look at their face and you can see that they're like thinking or trying to figure out what's going on. And a lot of that comes because they're ahead of the lead. And that means that, they're not hanging back. They don't have that like back pitch slightly. And it's not like a drastic back pitch. It's not, but it's just enough so that she's letting him move her. And a lot of times not having that, it just creates confusion and it creates guessing from follows rather than just actually following. And there are reasons that you would maybe want to not be hanging back. Like if you wanted to do styling or something in particular, you wanted to communicate that you wanted to do something different to your partner. There are reasons that, you might not do that. However, generally, it is a good idea to think of as a follow, letting your lead move you.
Yeah. And just for leaders to be aware, this is also something that leaders do, particularly when they brace on a post step, so count 4 of a 6 count pattern or count 6 of an 8 count pattern. You engage in a brace step, which is a delayed weight transfer where you're actually bracing against the follows movement to counterbalance them. But then after that, to transition properly into an anchor with your partner, you want your follow to in part carry you forward over your left foot that you have posted. So both roles use this technique just at different times. So it's really important to understand how a lot of movement in West Coast swing, when we say it's partnered, we mean it's assisted.
Yeah.
You're not 100% under your own power or weight. That is really crucial for the West Coast swing connection to function properly, is to put weight into it and resistance into the system.
Yeah.
And then just while we're here, so right here, as Sarah is drawing her right foot past her left foot, it's so hard to see, but Jordan is taking their handhold away from the camera ever so slightly to encourage her right foot to be more in front of her left foot when she places it.
Yeah.
Instead of on a separate track. And what that allows is for, in this handhold, you can see how also the rotation of his wrist is different. But that's in part because he is now bringing the handhold ever so slightly towards the camera. So he took her away from us to plant her right foot and brings her toward us for planting her left foot. And that's what creates the prep in her left shoulder that he can then really easily release without much effort. Like you can see he's kind of just like gently moving her hand to her left, and that's indicating for her to turn. The hand was super gentle, but because he had prepped her shoulder properly, the response was greater than the release of the prep, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I also wanted to add that I wanted to point out, so you can kind of see that backwards angle that Sarah has, but Jordan also has like an outward arcing angle to him. And if Sarah does not have that hanging back, Jordan can't have that arc to him. So if you're to look at not these two, if you're looking at a different partnership, and they both look very upright, it's because somebody isn't doing something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it takes both of you, right? So if as a follow, like you also need the lead to counter you. So if your lead's not doing that, you also can't necessarily hang back as much,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa. So if you see two people that are really upright, there is not as much of a lead follow aspect as there could be.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think that was the in-depth technique portion of this evening.
Probably, yes.
All right.
But you never know.
Are you going to talk about
I
this
was gonna talk about
styling?
this,
Okay,
so.
good. Because I love this part so much.
Yes. So we have Sarah doing a little playing around. So Jordan obviously lifts the hand up above her head, and so she kind of now has the freedom to do as she pleases, so to say. So what she does, it's really clever the way that she goes about this, because it's not her just dropping all of that weight at once. So she very gradually goes into it. And the way that she does that is she plants her feet, and then she starts engaging her upper body, specifically her arm, and then she takes the rest of the body with her. It's kind of like a ripple effect. So she starts with engaging the arm, and she lets the chest fall forward, which adds some extra weight there. So Jordan now knows that she's wanting more weight or more resistance for that weight. And then she allows her hips to follow. So it's kind of like a snake almost, right?
Yeah.
It's not all one piece. And the reason that she does it this way is to gradually give him that weight so that it's not all at once. I really don't like the whole, I'm just going to drop all of my weight all at once.
Yeah.
It's not great for either person, honestly. You want to be gradual about it. And this is a really, really cool, like, trust moment, just because, you know, it's a very unique connection, the way that they have, because Sarah it's like behind her with her hand specifically. And Jordan really has to resist that. How do I explain it? Like up and around, kind of, because of the way that she's going into it.
Yeah, I can talk about that more if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I'll let you do that in a second. But yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, basically, it's just a very unique connection because it starts really up at the top as she drops. So it's a little bit different, and it's a really fun way to play around with this specific piece that he's leading her into. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So this is one of those instances where the center counterpoint still needs to function as a point of counterbalance, aka a point of tension. However, the center counterpoint is moving through space while it's still functioning that way. So as you can see right here, the handhold is up here, more screen right. And as Sarah moves into this, the handhold is going with her. And I just want to emphasize that even though the hand is traveling with her, Jordan is resisting that motion. And the way he's doing that is by shifting his body over towards his left foot and kind of lunging over his left foot. And that's what's allowing him to have weight behind the handhold. But the way he's allowing the hand to travel with Sarah, so she's not ending up doing the most scariest tricep stretch of all time, is he is rotating his upper body. So as you can see in this frame, Jordan's upper body is square to us in the camera. And as he shifts weight to his left foot, he rotates his upper body to the right. So his left shoulder is now much closer to us. And he extended his left arm so it's straighter. So it's less straight here. He's straightening it as he's rotating and shifting his weight over. And it's the combination of those three things that is allowing this center counterpoint to travel through space while still having tension in it that Sarah can work off of to feel more stable and taken care of while she's doing this. Because while this isn't a fully weight supported move, it's weight assisted. She could catch herself if he were to suddenly let go. She would just shift one of her feet out in front of her and catch herself. But that would happen if he were to suddenly let go. She would need to catch herself.
Yeah. They also, you can kind of see they're creating, like, between the two of them, like an 8 shape. Can you draw that? Do you see what I'm talking about? Yes. So it's a really unique shape that they have. Especially because it's not just, there's multiple dimensions to it.
Yes. I think I just want to highlight how, to bring Sarah out of this, notice how straight Jordan keeps his arm until right about here. So that way she is continuing to be comfortable and she has a frame around her face with her arm and her hand.
Yeah, he's making sure that her hand is going out around that foot that he wants her to step on.
Yes.
So we want her to step on that left foot and come up over herself. So she's now more under her own power. So he makes sure that he moves that hand past and around that foot. Because of the way that she's shaped, that hand does have to go out around it in order for her to be moved back up over that foot.
Yeah. And you can see how he actually doesn't quite get it far enough. So she actually picks up her left foot and brings it towards her ever so slightly. It's on one side of the crack in the floorboard here, and it's on the other side here. And that's the kind of thing that's really easy for her to do because she's so small. I just want to highlight how important what Alicia said is to really get it past the foot you want the follow to be over top of, and have it, the handhold be the appropriate radius away from the top of the center of the follow's head. So that way they can actually get over that foot. So if we actually extrapolated Sarah's head and arm over this foot, head and arm, the handhold would actually need to go here for Sarah to not have to move her left foot. And then a follow with an even longer arm, the hand would have to go even further.
Yeah.
To have the same effect.
Yeah. I also want to add that it is especially important in this particular instance because her arm is like locked into that position. A lot of times, like we've talked about it before, like as a follow, when your hand goes over the head, it should be pretty comfortable, pretty loose, like lightly active. But because of the way that she goes into this, there's like a lot of activation in her arm, a lot of tension. So she needs to have him bring it around just because she can't just disengage or she's going to fall or something awkward is going to happen with her shoulder. So he really needs to make sure that he's directing that in a correct manner or else it's going to be dangerous for her. So
yeah, basically whenever a follow's frame is in shaping that carries into their spine, and you think of it like the classic barber pole sign that spins and it looks like an illusion. Like if the follow's frame is like that, either up or down, they can't change what their shoulder is doing, because locking the shoulder into that shape is part of what's creating the shape.
Yeah.
So as a leader, you need to then honor that shape and respect the radius that it demands for leading them through it. Yeah, that's another one of those banes of my existence problems I have. I would like to shape, but
The
definitely.
shoulder width thing.
Yeah.
Anyways. So we come out of that like really angled forward moment for Sarah, and she comes and she does the exact opposite, which is a really, really nice, what word am I looking for?
Contrast.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a really nice contrast to her like very drastically leaning forward, and now she comes and she sits back really far. It's really, really nice. It's really nice to have those kind of contrasting moments.
And that's something that you don't necessarily have to think too hard about. You just have to lean into the physics of what's happening, because this very naturally resolves in an equal and opposite counterbalance in the other direction. So she just had to sink into it and to let it happen instead of resisting it. So many beautiful moments in West Coast swing don't happen because people resist it mentally.
Yeah.
And they don't allow the physics to naturally resolve and follow through.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me of something. So Melissa's been my coach for a while. And one of the things that I've talked with her about, I don't remember why this came up, but she was talking about being able to move through the awkward. So, you know, even though there are always certain things that come up where you're like not quite in the right position, or, you know, like something different than you intended to happen happens, like, you know, little awkward things kind of always come up. But it's really important to be able to let those moments resolve and not just like, you know, clench and try and fix it. Generally, unless it's a really dangerous, you know, situation, generally those moments are going to resolve themselves in a nice manner. You just kind of have to let them finish. You know, it tends to be like you're in the middle of something is when an awkward kind of moment tends to come up. But you just need to let it resolve. You know, awkward moments happen. It happens to everyone. It is what it is. But really just dancing through that and just, you know, not freaking out about how you're not where you want to be or think you should be. That's super important. That's actually one of my favorite things that Melissa has ever like said.
Right.
It's such a great like tidbit, you know, especially as follows who really like to play around with things. That's such an important concept to have. Do we want to move on to song 2?
I think so. I think I just want to talk really quickly about this hook behind that Jordan does, because it's so
go ahead.
Delightful. So the really great thing about this hook behind is like how natural it is relative to the physics of what this pattern is doing. He's basically doing a grapevine. And the only reason it looks fancy is because his right arm is in front of him and crossing his body. Otherwise, it's just a grapevine.
Right. He also has kind of like a 4/4 use kind of on releve with that planted foot.
Yeah, it helps make room, so it's a lot easier to sneak it behind.
Yeah, you can see as he draws that right leg up underneath him, so he's in a pretty drastic like lungy position to start out with. As he brings that right leg up underneath him, he allows more space for it by kind of straightening out that left leg that's planted.
It's very subtle. But that's just like a really simple way, if you're already going to be shifting your slot out the back end of a push break, to add some dimension to what you're doing as a leader. Just you stay rotated to the right and hook behind. and it looks really cool. Anyways,
I forgot that we didn't get to their little lift.
Oh yeah.
Which I actually wanted to mention. You guys watched the full video beforehand, so you saw it. There was like a small lift that happened between the two of them, which it wasn't intentional by either of them. It was just based on how they were both positioned and how they both kind of got up out of it. But for Boogie, as far as I'm aware, lifts aren't allowed. So I believe that disqualifies them from placing. The stance didn't place, obviously, but I do think it would have otherwise.
I agree.
Oh, perfect.
I found it.
We didn't quite get there, but.
Oh no.
I love how immediately in the background, Benji's just like, oh no.
I think this is just one of those unfortunate side effects of how tiny she is. Because she's ready for a dip, but his stance is just simply too wide for how small she is. Like if she hadn't hooked her elbow around his neck, she probably wouldn't have gotten air. But just by the fact of how tall he is compared to her, and she put her elbow across his shoulders, meant that unless he does a deep squat right now, she's getting air time.
Yep.
I feel like that's one of those that's just, well, whoops, she's so small. Yep. Like if they hadn't then kind of had the attitude of, well, fuck it, and then continued to lift, I probably personally would not have disqualified them. Because that's, to me, that's just a flub of physics of how tiny she is.
Yeah. Yeah, because as soon as Jordan stands up, she's off the floor because she's so close to him.
Right.
And she's clearly shorter than him.
Right. So are there particular things in this second dance you want to talk about that I can go find so that way we save time?
Not necessarily, because this dance is pretty, like, especially in comparison to the first one, it's pretty laid back. Like they have a lot of moments where they're paused and just kind of grooving, which is great. I love that.
Waving and shrugging. Love this moment. I actually wanted to talk about these just tiny chugs that Jordan does, because where they're posted relative to each other right now is fairly max tension because of how squared off they are to each other.
Yeah.
And for this grooving moment to be super comfortable for Sarah, Jordan just comes towards her just like a couple of inches, just a little bit. And that encourages her weight to free up and come towards him.
Yeah.
And then he keeps going. So that way, when he transitions to his one next, there's a lot of contrast in that transition. But he doesn't just like right out of the gate come a whole step closer to her. He does it slowly. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. He doesn't right off the gate just like, hi, how are you? That's a different pattern. Instead, this is just a really strategic, like you can see him pick up his right foot and plant it just like an inch in front right here. Do, 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 do. Like the tiniest step on the planet. Quite impressively small. And that just allows enough slack in the connection that this grooving can happen.
Yeah, it gets him out of split weight.
Yeah. Because if he had tried to do that in place, because of how much tension they had in the handhold, it might have invited her to come forward. Anyways, and then there's this contrast right here. So like he takes a nice confident step with his right foot and then with his left foot into the one so that they can transition into actually traveling and moving.
Clarity. It's wonderful.
Clarity.
I love that we just have some nice, like, basic stuff happening. It's really great, honestly. I would actually say, especially because at the champ level, that doesn't happen as frequently. We don't see champs do a lot of basics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really nice to see. I think that it's just nice for them to like get that example that it doesn't always have to be super complicated, but it's also nice because it's great examples for people to watch for how they should model their basics.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to go back and show how Jordan kind of leads this piece of performance. Like it's a performance moment. He can't really lead her movement, but he really preps big by bringing his
Yeah.
arm up and his like nose to his own shoulder.
Yep.
Which gives a lot of contrast to this moment, which not only makes his moment hit better, so it lands with the audience better, but then it's a really clear like handoff as a partner in performance that it's then Sarah's turn. So it's like a call and response that's led.
Sarah's like, oh, we're doing something. Okay.
Like, oh, okay. And she gets it in part because of how he preps
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Yeah,
it's very dramatic.
So dramatic. And then this is like if the geek in Greece was trying to do Grease lightning and his leather jacket was taken from him immediately afterwards. So sorry.
Like we have now transported into the universe of Grease.
I know.
Now the whole little Grease lightning dance thing is like in my head.
Sorry, not sorry. Here, have some pretend Jordan's backup dancer in the background. Please hold, please hold, please hold. Here we go. I'm gonna stop now. We'll see if I have the guts to make that the intro for this week's replay.
Oh man. So on that note, actually, there's something else that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about kind of visual following a little bit. And
here's
that's
another
a
great section for that. Okay.
I love the cheese. It's great.
Oh, it's so good. It's like my lifeblood, the cheese. Anyways, please talk about visual following.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of talk about that a little bit. I mentioned earlier that in this dance in particular, their eyes are downturned to the floor a lot because they do have some really strong physical connection with the hands and everything. Visual following is interesting. It has its uses, but it can also kind of be used, it can be a crutch to an extent if you use it too much. Like it's great for like these moments, when you're like, oh, we're not really doing something that's necessarily leadable, but we're gonna do it together. Like that's a great moment for visual following. Another example is like if you as a more experienced dancer are dancing with somebody that doesn't have as much experience, so you might not quite get all of the connection and leads that you might expect. So that's a great reason for using visual following as well. However, if you get to a certain level and you're still using visual following rather than, hanging back and using that connection, it can kind of become a hindrance for good connection and for nice dances sometimes, quite honestly. So I just wanted to mention that visual following is great. Just be careful when you're using it that you're not overusing it, kind of.
I would like to add, because for leading, visually paying attention to your follow, especially if they don't have the physical connection skills that you would like, paying attention visually can allow you to lead them the way that they would prefer if they had those good connection skills.
Yeah.
And then they think you're a god. So, like, for example, noticing a follow's range of motion to get into a prep properly, like we were talking about earlier, you can lead a follow into that, even if they don't necessarily have the best connection skills for that organically. As a leader, what you can do is almost do a caricature lead of what would be ideal for them. So it's a little bit more exaggerated. Maybe the timing is a little bit more either staccato or legato, depending on the effect you want to have. But you just turn up the volume on it a little bit, but based off of what would naturally be ergonomic for them. And you'd be surprised how many follows can do that, even if they don't have advanced connection skills yet. Can we just have a moment for this beautiful Sarah face?
I know.
This every time I see this moment, it just makes me so happy.
She's just really feeling it.
Really feeling it.
More that.
So good. Jordan is so happy.
Such a great dance.
So wonderful.
And I think it's funny, like, you know that it's a really fun dance when you can look at the background and see all the champs like smiling and enjoying themselves as well. I wanted to mention that Sarah does take a second and redirects her attention to the audience as she comes back. It's a pass or he throws her out. I don't remember which, but she's taking a moment as she's tripling around to engage with the audience, which is great, especially because, you know, this dance is really like between them, which is great. And in terms of this is a performance, it's great that she still is very clear about, you know, engaging with the audience.
It also has the added bonus of just slowing down the pattern, giving herself a little extra time because they've been dancing for a long time at this point.
Yeah.
And it just helps slow things down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because 99.9% of leaders will not do anything if your back is to them.
Yes.
Which more often than not is helpful, but sometimes in shadow position, man, that's annoying. How many times? Let me know in the comments, follows. How many times have you been led into shadow position and then the leader won't actually lead you out of it? So you have to do this awkward, like, are we done now? And you lead yourself out.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, you have the choice to hang out there forever or to move yourself.
Yep. And then the leaders half of that is you put a follow in shadow position, but then they just split weight and ground. And you would have to apply significant force to get them out of it.
Yeah.
So you just let them lead out of it. Anyways, if you're a follow who thinks leaders don't lead you out of that, first ask yourself, am I just not movable easily at that point in time? Because if so, make it easier to change weight.
Yeah.
And leaders, just if they plant themselves, you can always scroll away.
Yeah.
If you want control. Anyway. So many tangents.
I know.
You got Westy problems, we got Westy solutions. Hashtag nerdy Wesco swing. And hashtag Westy thinking machine.
That was exactly what I was going to say. There's, I think, one other thing that I really wanted to talk about in this dance, in terms of Sarah. She does a really great job of, I'm not sure if I want to kind of call it like regrounding and settling, but you can very much see that there's a moment at like the end of the slot where she kind of resets herself and like almost takes a like exhale, right? And so everything just kind of relaxes and drops. And that's really important for follows to be able to do, is to kind of be able to take that moment at the end of the slot and be able to ground, partially because of connection, but I want to mention that it's important for timing. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I see a lot of times, is not having that like drop or grounding moment, whatever you want to call it, you know, not having that moment creates follows that move ahead of the time of the song. And it will create some really weird leads happening too, because they realize that their follow is ahead of, you know, where they should be. And so things kind of happen off time, all of that kind of stuff. So it's really important as a follow for you to be able to take that moment and really ground, relax, whatever you want to call it, you know, for timing purposes. Next week, like I said, we're our topic is keep it simple. We're talking about Lindo and Jessica McCurdy. And it's a really fun dance between them. It's I believe it's a demo. So we're going to go over that. And like I said, we kind of touched on that a little bit this week as well. So I feel like this week and next week are very social dance friendly for those that don't compete frequently or don't compete at all. You know,
yeah. And then I would argue that good competition dancing comes from good social dancers.
Accurate. That's actually a great point. A lot of times I feel like we really separate it. And like, yes, competition does require some extra skills, but it's not an entirely different set of skills. Like, it's just skills that you add on to the social dance skills that you have. So
yeah, it leads back to just improving your performance muscle. That's like social dancing. It's very common to dance with someone in front of your friends, and so you're performing for them to an extent. And that's a great environment to practice your performance skills, because if you can get your friends to engage and like be really in on it and not be able to watch any other couple on the floor, you know you're doing something right. And that's the kind of energy you want to bring into your competition dancing. Yeah. Cool. Well, I don't think we have any questions. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We will be back next week with Keep It Simple.
Yep. All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Gather energy. To the screen share. Okay. Bill Nye the Science Guy session over. Did that make sense to you, Alicia?
Yeah.
Cool.
There was something I wanted to say about Jordan in this particular song, and I can't remember what it was.
Is it his He's So Happy smile?
I don't think that's exactly what I was going to talk about, but yeah, that is. It's a lot.
It's wonderful.
Right.
There are just certain songs that Jordan gets, and he's just like on top of the world. And I always know that those are my favorite dances of his. And pinches her cheek. Oh, so good. Not actually sure I ever caught that.
Like, okay.
I look forward when we start doing our own concept videos, so that way I can develop my own filming and editing style, because I have so many opinions about West Coast swing camera work. Most of them are not polite opinions. I want to find a style that works and still honors the integrity of what West Coast swing is supposed to look like.